session to order then at 6:35. And we shall start with our review of the Main Street Historic District Grant Program for 2020. Everybody have a chance to look that over, the 2019? Okay. So Andrea has some ideas about what could be eligible costs and how to put the application together for this year.
Yeah, so I have a couple of suggestions here, and my thought is that, you know, if anyone else has come up with additional ideas, let's bring them on up for discussion. And then after the discussion tonight, I'll gather those up and put them into a resolution and a new program for 2020 and bring it back to the board next month. So I'll start off with the changes that I am suggesting. And the first one is to clarify eligible facade work. So we haven't really had a definition for that. And I thought that, well, I guess we have, it's just been kind of vague. And so any new work to a facade would seem to me to be facade work, new work, which would include restoration, something new being done to a facade, and including rooftop equipment screening. You know, as you may know, we have a lot of rooftop equipment that's very visible down there on Main Street. And at least in the past, that's been something that the staff has kind of promoted applicants to apply for to help out with that. The next one is, Andy, did you have a question? I can wait. Oh, you wanna talk about, should we talk about each one first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
If you have a question, Andy, go ahead.
Oh, okay, however you wanna do it. I think I see where you're going with new work, but then I think I'm overthinking it. So if somebody wants to do repointing or some kind of work that's not really adding a new element, but it's still important to protect the integrity, that's still good, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You know, maybe we would want to take out the word new, just use work, maybe that's clearer.
I had the similar confusion as well. I was concerned that it was trying to eliminate any restoration or, rehabilitation of facades when it says new work.
Okay.
I have some concern over it.
Okay, should we eliminate the word new?
Okay. Do you think under that, Andrea, that would require a COA for facade work, or would it be de minimis and really just restorative?
Yeah, so if under the Historic Preservation Code, if it's maintenance, it doesn't require a COA. So if we were to do chuck pointing, or for example, like the Spotswood House, they had, the owner took out the windows, had them repaired and put those same windows back in. That was maintenance, that did not require a COA. So some things can just go through with the grant alone and not that review against the criteria. Other things, of course, if there was a building that, for example, had a storefront but was not consistent with the historic look and they wanted to go back and restore the old look, even then though that would be seen as a restoration project, that would come to the board for review and approval.
One other question on this item as well regarding the rooftop screening. I know we've offered in the past, but it's always been a condition of, it was basically some existing rooftop units.
Yes.
I don't think it would be in line to authorize new rooftop units being seen from that front facade. Is there a way to clarify or classify that a little more, you think?
No, yeah, I think we could rewrite it that way if that's.
Or is it needed to be including of existing rooftop units perhaps?
Kind of
that
thinking
have
about
already
the
been-
view house, where they put the rooftop units up and then they were kind of in violation of the COA, but then they needed to be screened. So then do we authorize funds for screening of those rooftop units?
Or the other restaurant, Main Street.
Oh, the one, yeah.
Where there was some existing ones and they were reconfiguring it a little bit, but it was still an existing location. And we felt it was important to screen them from that facade.
What about, we have this happen often, there's an existing rooftop unit and it's failed. And so property owner, once they take, and it's not screened. So they need to take it down, change it out, and then they're required to screen it because they're putting in a new rooftop unit per our zoning regulations. Would that be an instance where you would think that the grant program would apply?
I would assume so, it's an existing location, but yeah, I don't know how this is very classified in this language.
Well, I can work at the wording of it, if I understand what you're after.
So you would, in that particular case, you have a situation where you basically have a grandfathered unit that's sitting on top of the roof and has been for many years, maybe not screened. It would be desirable to have it screened. And if they swap it out, even if they replace it with basically the same model that's on there now, because they're doing that replacement and it is considered a new unit, it would require screening.
Yes, our regulations require the screening.
And if they weren't in that situation, they would be eligible for grant funds to pay for screening. If they were, adapting to become a restaurant and they needed additional rooftop ventilation or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what David is saying, so if it's,
Yeah.
you need a whole new big piece of equipment in
Yeah.
conjunction with changing use.
Yeah,
So if,
That
That's my
would
concern.
not be a,
so if, I think that, it should be consistent across the board. If any requirement for screening or any screening is eligible for funding, then I think all screening should be eligible for funding. Is that clear? Do you know what I mean?
Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's. Alright.
And then if I could just kind of back up just a tiny bit, with these recommendations and your thoughts on it, are there any, what caused these recommendations? Are there situations that you have arisen that you think need to be rectified, or
yes.
why do we need to make any change at all?
Yes, applicants come with their projects and oftentimes we're kind of working through the criteria, what's eligible cost and what's not an eligible cost. And the language hasn't been clear enough in a number of instances to know. And on some of them, like roofing, I felt was never very clear, but the board has over the years approved roofing projects. So I have said, yes, it's an eligible expense, but it would be better to have that clarified in the grant program. And then the board may also want to consider roofing as a category in general. We've had a number of roofs, they get funding, they do cost a lot, and we can't see them. So maintenance can be important, but also so can improvements that the public can see. So leave that to you to provide your thoughts on.
Yeah, we'd like to get our bang for the buck and have the visibility of what we've been able to help fund downtown be a showcase. But you're right, you can't really see a roof, especially a flat roof. And so, but it's very important for maintenance, but I know on page 2, we talk about maybe some limitations to the funding levels for these, so.
I think it is critical to that kind of maintenance for roofing to maintain the integrity of the building and even the facade or critical elements, so I could see how it could fall into something that's value, but yeah. Maybe it's a lesser value than some of the other shiny objects that we can throw out there.
And failure to maintain a structure can be absolutely catastrophic.
Exactly.
That could cause you to lose the historic structure.
Right, so there's value in
Yeah.
sponsoring it.
And anyone who's ever owned an old home knows how it just is soul crushing to have to write giant checks for stuff that nobody really sees and enjoys. So,
And from a clarification standpoint, I think that's good, Andrea.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright. Then moving on to number 3, clarify eligible costs for maintenance. So currently, maintenance of equipment and devices unrelated to mechanical systems of the structure is not an eligible cost. And I'm suggesting that we reword this to say that limit maintenance to the following. Maintenance including restorative painting, repair, replacement of deteriorating materials, and mechanical systems of the structure. So we've had a couple of grants in the past for painting. And we've sort of said in the past, you know, if we have a new tenant coming in and it's been 3 or 4 years since the property's been painted and the new tenant wants a new color, that's not really an eligible expense. But if you have a building where there's rotting wood and all sorts of restorative work that needs to occur before that painting gets done and puts the building back together, that's eligible. So was looking to help clarify that and also talk to the board about maintenance in general. It sounds like, you know, talking about roofs, that you feel that it's important. And I'd like to comment on other sorts of maintenance.
Under mechanical, Andrea, should we include electrical systems as well? I mean, I think we've given a grant for electrical.
So, and I think it was more under the pretense of, you know, almost like life safety in a sense,
Fire
where it
prevention.
had some safety concerns.
Yeah.
Not just, we wanted to add some more switch banks, you know, or different light,
So safety,
You're
wood
really
I think
safety.
some safety improvements.
Mhm. Okay, so it'd be mechanical and electrical system.
and that could cover lighting as well. One of the things that we've talked about, just activating and keeping a streetscape and alleys and everything like that really viable as public space is lighting, appropriate lighting. So concealed
So more
lighting.
than just health and safety,
Yeah,
to include lighting.
yeah.
You could
So
consider
maybe
that part of
perhaps.
safety as well.
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
to
Yeah,
That's a
cover
good
the
point,
lighting.
yeah.
Just activating areas.
Smart.
In Littleton, you know, actually, when you kind of wander around and you're, you know, off of the main street with all of the beautiful Christmas lights and the trees, it's pretty dark in
Yeah,
some places.
it's hard to see the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's like, ooh.
How about plumbing, Andrea? I know that we gave a grant to the house on the corner of Powers and Prescott for its plumbing line, you know, the new drain line that they had installed in the backyard.
Yes,
Would that be an eligible cost here too?
that was for tax credit.
Okay.
You know, it was a question of actually if that was going to be approved by the state or not.
Mhm.
And I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
But certainly if the board, if you feel that that's an appropriate project to fund, we can include that.
I'm not sure I'd include it.
It's another pricey one.
Yeah, very pricey, especially if you have to dig up Main Street to put in a new sewer, depending where it goes. That might be beyond our
Yeah,
Scope.
scope, yeah. So we'll stick with mechanical and electrical. Okay. And then talk about a little bit of the limitations that you're proposing for these.
Yeah.
We've been doing 80%, correct?
We've been doing 80%
Up to.
and for my looking around at other grant programs around the state, they tend to be about 50% was the most common rate that was done, somewhere or as low as 25. And some did tier it out the way I've suggested here. And the district is different now than when it first got started 15 years ago, where there was a lot of work that was needed to be done. And not all the property owners necessarily had the money to do it. A lot of them had owned their properties for maybe, many decades. And so now I thought was maybe a time to discuss whether or not the 80% is still justified. And then just for fun, I said, well, maybe if we get someone to opt in, they can get a one-time 80% grant to really entice those people to join.
That's not a bad
Thoughts,
idea.
yeah.
And it would be, again, treating new folks, if you will, the same as the existing people were treated. We're eligible for 80%.
I like the tiered approach as well, as it gets, some of those maintenance or roof work things, keeps them coming back maybe for a few years to keep some of that maintenance. But it's just little chunks to keep it going, it still keeps it, visual in front of our eyes.
Do we typically give 80%, or how does it usually shake
Well,
out?
Yeah, so many times there is more money requested than it's available. And typically, I think what I've seen is that it's just divided out kind of evenly between, not even amounts, but same percentage amounts, whatever that comes out to be, 60%, 63%, whatever it is. But there have been some projects, that have gotten 80%.
What percentages were given to the Masonic Temple for the tuck pointing? Because there were 2 grants, weren't there?
There were 2 grants. I think you had a different historic preservation planner during those.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
I think we did 4 sides of that building over 4 years, Kim.
Yeah, and that was actually very successful. I mean, they used it's a good use of, they used the money and they fixed the building up.
Because they were a nonprofit, I think they got 80% each year.
Yeah, I seem to remember, and tuck pointing is wildly expensive.
Yeah.
And they did get a lot of money and it was well used.
So is that
Amazing.
another factor then to consider if they have some kind of financial need or emergency, or they are a nonprofit, they could demonstrate why they need something above 50% and then could be subjective to the decision of the board? What was the criteria?
How do you feel about that?
Cause my question was gonna be to you, Kim, do you think they would have done it if they had to give 50%? Would they have gone as far?
That I don't know.
I don't think so. Sitting in on the testimony of the applicants, they were scrambling for every dollar because they are a nonprofit. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Andy, that if there's a demonstrated financial need from a maybe nonprofit standpoint, or there's an emergency need. Of course, it's a year by year thing, so.
Sure.
I think the board should have some discretion.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question about the roof thing again, so to help me understand, I think I hear what you guys are saying, we don't wanna supplant, private money that should be set aside to maintain their own buildings. But I hear stories around the state about how once the roof goes bad, eventually you could get a request for a whole lot of money to replace a roof where maybe they didn't maintain it and it's totally their fault, but do we really wanna see it fall apart? No, of course not. So I'm knowing how destructive a bad roof can be, I'm wondering if we want a little bit of flexibility for when the right project comes along to say, absolutely, we'll give you 50% or more if they can demonstrate the need. What are your thoughts?
again, I like the idea of having some discretion. I mean, I see the value in setting up parameters, cause it's clear and fair to people who are considering applying. I also like the idea of being able to make decisions based on circumstance, to have that flexibility.
guess
So-
other cases would be taken on as an advisory basis, I guess, if there was a compelling reason that we really wanted to save a building, then we could actually increase our funding level, but no more than 80%. I mean, we would, that would be the
Right,
cap,
yeah,
correct?
agreed, that would be the same.
Okay.
80%, okay, and so then how is we're feeling about this tiered system, the 25 and the 50%, and then flexibility to go up to 80% with demonstrated need? And are you feeling good about the 25 and the 50?
I think for most maintenance things, I like that, cause it prevents them from waiting until it gets too big of a problem and then undertaking a much bigger project or requesting more money. Instead, maybe it gets income for the next 2-3 years, stay active in this process.
And increases the interest in the program, increases the number of applicants. And hopefully the city then will recognize the need and will go from $52,000 to $75,000 of available funds, you know.
Yeah.
Who knows, but that would be good. But typically we get 150 to 200% of our available funds in applications. So we routinely have to turn some people away or haircut their applications. So it'd be good to have.
We have a potential for a very big year for applications this year.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Aside from the obvious hole in the historic district that needs fixing.
Now that we're working on a emergency grant from the state. And the owner, Carl Pappert, is having just the toughest time with the insurance companies. And not even return phone calls. So and we need that information to go to the state, so we'll be working with the state and say, well, now what? Get the insurance isn't really returning calls. And you know, this is not his company, but the motorist's company. And the same thing for the tenant who was in there, she's not having any luck with his insurance company either. So we're working through that and he may get some good money through that. So I'm not sure, he may or may not apply for a grant. But I think through the year, talked to a couple different people who are interested, and there are potentially 2 storefront projects coming in.
Interesting. Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people talk to me, I'm not sure they want me to be bringing it out in a public meeting. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's good.
But there's
All right.
been interest, it's not like we have to promote this to dig up applicants.
Yeah, everybody knows about it, and there are a couple of property owners that have never taken advantage of it. And I have actually written to them and made some suggestions. I'm gonna come in and talk about any projects they may have thought about, but haven't gotten any response. So I'm quite sure everybody knows about it.
That's good.
Well, good. As far as the application, has anybody had a chance to take a look at last year's, and does anybody have any comments or additions, edits on that one? I think with Andrea's changes, you know, the costs are ineligible, I think, to do that. How much money is available this year?
This year is 50,000.
50,000 again?
We don't-
We used it all last year?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Completed projects.
Carl Pappert was one of the grant winners, and so we need to work through that. He hasn't done his work because he's been.
We may have to give him an extension.
Yeah.
And the other 2 have completed their projects and have been reimbursed.
Okay, so we're back to 50 this year.
You spent a lot of time on this last year.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of good work.
So we'll just change dates on the page 3 on the schedule, the amount of money. Do you have a new picture for the front, Andrea? You're gonna use the same one for,
Oh, I always change it every year because that's something people always wanna see their project on the front, and I get a lot of comments about that.
That's great.
But if anyone has an idea, just send me an email. haven't heard it, I haven't heard from anyone this year. But if you have any good ideas, just let me know.
Okay.
Something we, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just had a question. We were just talking about the project that applied, but is delayed because of the damage to the property. Is there a risk that now that we can only give the one extension of 6 months, that it could get delayed with the insurance problems to the point where it might be better for that individual to turn back the money now and come back again later?
Yeah.
When, I'm just wondering if that,
Yeah, that could be a good strategy now that the program can keep the money and it's not lost. So.
because then we could award it this time.
Right. True.
And then when they're ready, ladies and gentlemen, he comes back in, ready to go.
Yeah.
We've already been through it, we know it's a good project, but.
That's not the picture we wanna put on this year's cover, is it?
No, would he,
No.
would he still be able to get the same amount of funding though for changing the?
Oh, that's a good
Ordinance.
point. That's a good point. I don't remember
Yes,
how the percentage that you got.
I don't remember what the percentage was, but the actual amount was a little under 6,000, I believe.
Well, with the discretion that we're talking about allowing, maybe there's room to
Yes.
honor what we,
To have that discretion in there.
yeah.
Certainly an extenuating circumstance. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I like
I
that.
interrupted you, what were you gonna?
Well, I was just, I think we ask about this every year. This, because this is the grant program for an historic district, is there any way that we would think about extending grant funding to an area that has not been declared a district? And I'm thinking of the Littleton corridor.
Yeah, so that would be a change that would have to go through city council because the boundaries of the program are defined in the historic preservation code.
So if we choose to want to pursue that in the future, I don't think anybody's chomping at the bit at this moment, but that's something that we could do.
Yes, yeah, make a recommendation to city council.
A code change.
So that it's not necessarily to declare a district so we can fund it with the grant program, but to use grant funding outside of a district in maybe a very specific location or something, so we can talk about that later.
And that may be a topic for the upcoming Unified Land Use Code discussion that we, this 2-year project that we're doing with Kendon Keys to combine the development code, the subdivision code, and the historic preservation code. And maybe that is, could be part of that discussion. Or, I'd suggest maybe we could think about that as part of that whole broader discussion.
Sure.
There's an opportunity coming up.
Okay. So,
Sorry, I admit though that I love this idea that you came up with, that one-time investment if you just came in. And it is a good reminder that this is a strong incentive. So timing, you could instead play the timing so that if this group decides they do want to become their own district, this could be something that pulls them a little bit in that direction. I don't know how strong of a pull it is, but I would hope.
I would
That would be-
imagine a lot of those properties are going to want to do some fixing up and taking advantage of resources.
Well, and under our considerations, that's always been something that we've given strong points for, is if it's a property coming into the district, even though it's not stated in the considerations now. That was always a criteria, boy, if you're coming in, we'd love to help, so that worked out very well in the past. Okay,
Good thoughts.
yeah. Well, good job, Andrew, this is a great application, I think it's very, very comprehensive. And if I'm an applicant, I think I know exactly what I should be doing.
Okay, and it's obviously working, it really is. Good job.
Any other comments, questions about the grant process? So we will look at the final draft next meeting, February.
That's
of the,
right.
application.
That's
Okay.
right, and I'll have the brochure prepared,
Okay.
so it can be reviewed.
In the meantime, if you have any thoughts or comments and want to get with Andrea, when would be the deadline to get anything to you?
Oh, how about if I send out an email with the deadline, just a
Okay.
reminder.
Alright, so if you haven't had a chance to really dig into it and you want to, go ahead.
And as a crazy reminder, so we should actually check our city email from time to time to look for that email.
We probably ought to do within a couple weeks or so, some amount of urgency while it's still fresh, that type of thing.
Yeah.
What's still fresh, would be
Yeah.
good, yeah.
Is everybody able to access their city email?
I have not, because we got a new system, right?
Yes, that's right.
I haven't seen an email come through, I personally maybe I gotta comb through to see if, is there
Oh,
the process to activate it or access it.
I see up on the screen that says Office 365 Training Center there, so that's what we're using now, David, is the Office 365. It's actually pretty easy to use. You can just log on to, or Google Office 365, go on to that. It'll ask you for your password, and your account should be set up. You may end up getting a text with another code, and then from there, you're golden.
Alright, well,
It's pretty easy to do.
navigate to the main website and find that link.
I think it's even easier than the last one that we had, the last system that we used.
if you try it out and have trouble, give me a call and
Okay.
we'll figure out how to
Thank you.
Right.
get it working for you.
We can't solve it, we can patch you into IT. and
Exactly, there'll be someone that can do it.
Yeah,
in fact, I emailed IT and they were so on it so quick
Yeah.
and told
Yeah,
me
they're
great,
really
so
good about it.
helpful.
Yeah,
Open a ticket.
Yeah.
yeah, you can give them a call directly, you can email them, or contact us.
Okay, good. All right, well, good. Let's move on to the discussion on process for building the Littleton Legacy property list.
Okay, so we talked about putting something together for moving forward with the Littleton Legacy list, now that there's a resolution in place. And so Mike and I sat down and we brainstormed the idea that you see suggested here. And we're certainly not wedded to this idea, be a good starting point for the discussion. But in our brainstorming, we came up with the idea that there would be not one committee, but a series of committees, so that the committee doesn't potentially go on for years and there's burnout and it's just always kind of evolving on who's on the committee. And that projects would be identified for that committee to work on, complete, and report back to the HPB on. So the first committee would be the committee that organizes all of it. And essentially says, here are the projects that we need to do. And we're gonna work it, for example, we're gonna work it by determining what is the area of greatest need first. And the city staff is gonna tell you what is downtown, because we are working on the code update for downtown fairly shortly here. And then there may be other areas of the city that where we also need the information. We need the Littleton Legacy list built up in that geographic area. It might be a corridor or it might be a neighborhood. Another way to think about putting these projects together would be based on a theme. So it could be churches within the city, historic churches. And I think one of the advantages of that is that you can do some background study and research on historic churches, on that building type, that will then serve you for doing all of the churches all at once, rather than a neighborhood where you'd be dealing with different types of buildings. Churches might be an example, farmhouses, going around the city, finding all of them. Schools, maybe we have some historic warehouse buildings, none that I can think of, but that idea. And also during the period of time where the board is working on this, we may also consider applying for grants to have consultants do surveys as well. And so if one group is working on schools, then the grant could potentially be for churches or something, and so there's no overlap in a particular geographic area. And so that is what's being proposed. We're thinking that the committees might last around 3 months or so apiece, and that there would be 2 board members and a staff person for each committee. And we've kept it at 2 because once we get beyond the 2, we have to post for the meeting. But that doesn't mean that from time to time, if we need more board members, that we can't go ahead and post. So that's the staff proposal. Be looking forward to seeing what you think.
Okay, thoughts? I think Lisa is going to be our leader
Yeah.
for the organizational committee,
Yeah,
and I volunteered to be your,
yeah, so I sent out an email asking who would wanna be involved, but if we had email issues, then maybe you didn't see that. But the only people that responded were Laura and Mike. So that's 3, so I guess you guys can fight it out for who wants to be. But I guess that would be just setting up what the rest of the work is. I looked into the grants. Part of me thinks that, I guess, my main question is, are we signing ourselves up to do historic surveys of all of the churches in Littleton? Cause I just don't know that that's realistic for us to do if I can't even get emails in a month.
Yeah, welcome to
We'll fix the
HPC.
email.
Yeah.
That we can
just got on
fix.
like 2 weeks ago, so.
Well, I mean, no, not because of that. I don't know if we have enough time or capacity to do the survey work ourselves, is what I'm saying. I would lean towards spending our efforts, getting a good grant application together to get a consultant on board to do the work and not have us do the work.
Well, I did feel that it was very ambitious, but I was very impressed that the board had interest in filling out the surveys. But I think there are a lot of properties to be surveyed, and so, it may be just a whole lot more efficient to get a grant written. And then as the results come in, have the board look at them for possible inclusion on the list.
Yeah, I think that's more reasonable for us to get done. The other part that I was thinking that I might have misunderstood, but I thought we talked more about kind of like the educational component of the project. So not so much emphasis on, we did talk about surveying the properties that have become 40 years old since 2001. But we talked a lot about creating some sort of like database or brochure or something that the public can see that kind of celebrates the properties that have been identified as being potentially significant. So for me, that would be like the biggest emphasis at the beginning is to kind of get that started with the properties that we already know about. And then the survey work would be later, and it would also help to identify which areas, in addition to downtown, are the priorities for future surveys. So I kind of see it as a 2-step, like maybe this year we focus on that, because also the grants are split into education and survey. So if we focused on like an education grant, we could get the database, for lack of a better word, up and running, then focus on the surveying, and could go around for a survey grant. I think, are they twice a year that you can ask?
Well, yeah, so there's state historic fund grants, and there are 2 grant rounds per year, and then there's also the certified local government grant, which is 1 time a year.
Okay.
And those are actually easier to administer.
Yeah, okay.
So and actually we aren't required to have a match for that one.
Okay, so it's just for the state.
So that's kind of been the preferred one, the CLG. We have done the other. Littleton Boulevard actually was the state historic fund, so we've done both.
Well, I have why did you bring up churches? Where did that come from?
Well, when you're looking at themes, yes, so when we have a grant, either CLG or SHF, that we get, there's certain requirements that the consultants have to follow. And one of them is that after they complete their survey work, they have to identify what else in the community ought to be surveyed. And so there's a list of typically 5 to 8 different survey projects that will wind up on that list. And churches is one of them. So I think we have a nice collection of mid-century modern churches in the community. So I think that's just what came to mind.
Kind of by way of example.
We do have a wonderful selection of mid-century modern churches. And it seems like there's a church on every corner in Littleton, but in reality, there aren't that many in absolute numbers. And so it is kind of, it's a reasonable chunk. And there happens to be a really good church history that already exists in Littleton. So it's kind of like, wow, that's a huge step down the road to tackling that. And the other thing is a lot of the mid-century modern churches were built kind of to complement the mid-century modern neighborhoods.
Sure.
So it kind of all dovetails, and you've got a lot of that history, so you're not reinventing the wheel a lot. And that's just on churches. And I think that is a really interesting project, but it's certainly not where I would start. I like your idea of, you're with education and awareness, you're kind of laying a foundation. And it will serve the work that's being done in the downtown area, in the zoning and plan questions that are rising to the top. And it just, it's just, you have to start somewhere. And I think that's a really good idea. And it's doable. And the thing I like about this also is committees, especially volunteer committees, you can get scope creep to the point where it's like you're absolutely paralyzed. You can't do anything because of this huge issue that somehow has to be solved first, and which will never be solved. And therefore, we don't really have to do anything, we can all go home. So I like the idea of tackling some of the smaller things like that. And a question, just a kind of a logistical thing, can we utilize subcommittees? And my question is, volunteering Lisa for things here. Could Lisa kind of coordinate and manage a couple of subcommittees? And this is completely theoretical, just because these words have come into my mind, that one subcommittee tackles an education or grant applications and things like that, and scheduling what grants we're going to apply for, and the other one is doing churches. And can Lisa just kind of coordinate those activities? Is that acceptable? Can we do that logistically?
Well, with the sunshine laws, I'm not sure how much emailing you guys can do from one to the next groups to one another. So I think we might actually, unless you know, Mike.
Gosh, well, my attorney advice is terrible, because I'm not an attorney. But I think what I had heard in the past is that some of the subcommittee work had sort of gotten out of control a little bit. And
This is many years ago.
many years ago. And so the thought was to try and, if we want to look at committees, fairly succinct committees that were assigned with a task and a time frame, and it gets done. And try not to overlap the committees too much to avoid the problems we experienced in the past. And I don't know, probably subcommittees are doable, but it may get into that creep of, are they going to disrupt a timeline? you know, as you get committee and subcommittee, that has a potential to disrupt the timeline. Although, you know, having said that, I think, you know, this board's direction, we can accommodate a lot of different things. So, you know, depending on your direction, we can do different things. And we could potentially, you know, we could ask the attorney's office if there are any pitfalls to emailing and subcommittees and that type of thing. And we can find out more about that if you're interested in that type of thing.
I would be interested, but I think that, you know, there's a couple of things that we really, just as a board, we have to be cognizant of. And that is that, you know, we have somebody that's heading a committee and looking for volunteers to help, and we haven't necessarily been leaping in there to help. And, you know, I'm trying to kind of push us a little bit down to engagement, and it's so easy to move at a glacial pace and feel like you're doing something when in reality you're not.
Well, I think with this organizational committee, we can come up with the mission for this whole program. And I think you're right, Lisa, with the top importance is education of property owners. And that's kind of why we talked about the Littleton Legacy program altogether. But we do have to be cognizant of staff time, because I think we'll have a staffer with this organizational committee, whether it's you and me or you and Laura. But coming up with those ideas for where do we go from here, and then how, and maybe we can come up with a program to develop some small subcommittees, because we've also got to be cognizant of the fact that the city's going through a whole rezoning process. Downtown's the first place, and so this may be the primary focus of where we start with properties there. And you know, I'm certainly willing to dig in and look at surveys and figure out what properties still need to be surveyed. But you're right, we've got, for us to do all of that work would be probably beyond our scope.
I think the good thing about downtown is that every property is surveyed already. So it would be just updating in terms of condition and looking over what we have and making recommendations about what ought to be included on the list. Also, I think I've mentioned this in the past, many years ago we had an intern who put together potential historic districts downtown. And so pull that out and see how that still seems to be, may or may not apply with the redevelopment that's gone on downtown. And in doing that project, I think it could just help out our efforts with the zoning code tremendously.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And we have a lot of survey information and projects that have been done over the course of the years. And kind of that, literature review at the beginning of a project might be really useful. And there's all kinds of little gold nuggets that exist in our filing cabinets as far as surveys and work. And as far as doing historic business or building surveys, I mean that's a lot of heavy lifting. I mean that's a full-time job. So
that's why I really liked your idea of, maybe that's something we'd look for a grant to achieve some of these tasks, so it can actually gets realized.
And the other thing
I have to
about
agree with that too.
in the grants, I mean that is, being able to create a grant schedule and write grants that actually get funded. I mean that's, I think in a lot of ways, more golden than being able to just fill out the forms, you know what I mean? I think that is the gift that keeps giving, so.
I think it would be looked at pretty favorably for a grant when I was reading the handbook about it, like it's exactly what they want us to be used for. Is there staff, you mentioned that the SHF grant is harder to manage, is there enough staff capacity to manage those grants?
Well, it turns out that the city has now a grants writer. brand new position.
Cool. And they administer the grant.
Better yet.
I haven't either. But we
Um,
will soon.
So,
great.
yeah, so I mean, I don't know what may be on her plate or not.
Yeah.
But that would certainly be something we'd be looking at, and that would obviously be something she could handle. That would be the SHF grant.
I'd be happy to help out with that too, just somewhat. Like reviewing and thinking about how they're scored and things like that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, there are some grad students that have done some pretty amazing survey work and other stuff, and I don't know if I think we can arrange it for credit or for pay. So if we don't get as much grant money as we hope, or if we wanna just take that approach anyway, that could be a possibility. I'm trying to remember those, working with UCD, they did some really big project in Denver. Which one? I can't think of it right now, but
When I was in grad school, we did a big project surveying small commercial historic buildings and their energy systems. It was for like green buildings, but they
that's
used all of
awesome.
the grad students to go do the surveys.
Yeah, like a whole class
Yeah.
or more.
The city worked a lot with DU. It seemed like there were, and this was several years ago. I don't know which department, maybe planning, I don't know, but there were a lot of DU grad students. And they weren't necessarily historic preservation, but it seemed like we had some relationship with DU.
There's a Masters of Historic Preservation program at CU Denver,
Yeah.
and they have a survey class.
So we could work
I
with
know
that
who the
professor.
who I know who the professor was.
Oh, yeah.
So we could think about that in the future to tackle one like small discrete
Yeah.
topic.
And there's also, we don't often talk about partnering with ACC. I mean, they've got a history department. And, I don't know exactly, what creds or maybe they have certificate programs that this could serve as projects for. But, interesting.
Okay. So we had talked about the possibility of bringing in someone from the state to do some training on surveys. Is there any interest in that and understanding how that would work for people to do an occasional survey, or just hold off on that?
I think if we have that available to us, I think we should take advantage of it, because basically assessing condition and going in and looking at something, I mean, that also requires training. Reading the surveys requires some training. I think it would be incredibly beneficial and certainly a good use of our time. I don't know, I'm geek
Educational
about that stuff.
standpoint, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Skill to have.
Having some knowledge about it, even if it's not something we as a board take on ourselves, it'd still be good, I think, to have that knowledge a little more intimately about it.
Yeah, I think learning how to do it helps, especially in reading them and understanding why they focus on what they focus on.
Okay, would you be interested in doing that at a regular or a study session, or given that it may be about an hour and a half training time to come in on a weekend day, Saturday or something?
Find someone willing to come in the evening, I would say a study session.
I'm fine.
Yeah, if it's an hour and a half, Andrea, I guess we could do it on an evening,
Okay, so we could have potentially, if we have other business,
if we do, yeah,
just
exactly.
be a long, potentially long
Could be a
meeting.
long meeting, yeah.
Okay.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
That'd be a great resource to take advantage of. Maybe we're seeding new members coming up in the next couple of months.
Mhm.
It might be nice to coincide with that.
Okay.
And really scare them off.
Okay. I would like to suggest for all of the board members that as we jump into the zoning code downtown and all the work that we hope that you'll be involved in downtown, that there's interest in reading history about downtown Littleton. And on the city's website, if you go to the historic preservation page, there are surveys there that are online. And probably starting with the 1997 survey, which is on downtown. And it's a long document, but a certain amount of it is charts and lists and methodology. And the history section itself is maybe about 40 or 50 pages. And I would be happy to make a hard copy for anyone if they would prefer to read it that way. Otherwise, it's there online along with some other stuff, but that would be the recommended piece to start with.
Yeah, thanks. And they're actually good, they're fun to read, they really are.
Are any of us involved in the zoning code update? Like, are there stakeholder committees or?
So this board will be involved.
We don't have anything yet.
So we're building the work plan, but the anticipation is that each board and commission will have some involvement in that process.
I'll keep citing myself up for things, but I used to rewrite zoning code, so I'd be interested in participating if there's opportunity for that.
Great.
Fascinating job.
It's a big one, it's come up, yeah.
We really appreciate you coming
I'm done
with
signing
your
up.
ideas and things.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, this is really great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Really lucky to have your.
A great asset to the board.
And Lisa, we have some
Yeah.
links that you emailed me.
I was just, I was talking to some of the GIS people that I work with and got some ideas for maybe what, like the education thing could look like. So I just wanted to show you guys and see if this is what you guys were thinking, or there's just all these different levels of what you could do. So I found some examples. These are all map-based and interactive, so I don't know, we kind of talked about interactive things and also print, but this is LA, all their potential historic properties, obviously different scale than Littleton, but so like it shows the picture of it and a little information about it, and then you can click through to find more about it. There's also, sorry, I'm learning this mouse. So you can see what, like, obviously they must have done a survey down that road. How do I get back? Is it in GIS people were talking about these things called story maps, which incorporate more imagery. I don't know how much work it is to make these though. This one's Palm Springs. But this would be something that obviously we'd find a consultant that knows how to do this. But it walks you through like the stories of these different properties, and then you can find more information. This one isn't specifically historic, but you can see the map part is smaller and then just focus more on the imagery. Examples didn't keep. Let's see which this one is. This is Washington DC. They surveyed every single building. It's like the biggest project like this that's ever happened. And then they color coded it by age, which is pretty cool. And then you can click through. They said this is like the most detailed database of its kind. So you click through and it has all this information, roof material and original owner and that kind of stuff.
Huh.
So, and that one was like a 10-year project, so and it's also DC, much bigger.
Let's do that.
I do like the color coding of the age, that was cool.
Wow.
Two more examples. This one, oh, this one I just thought was cool when I was looking at them. It's less of like a survey and more of this cool thing that shows you like the historic platting underneath.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. This was, I think, somewhere in New Hampshire maybe, or there were a lot of Delaware ones. Not sure, but this is that story map thing, so there's lots of different ways that you can do that. This would be a lot harder to do with numerous properties. This would be more focusing on just a few. And then the last one is the least fun, but maybe the most realistic, and this is what we did when I was at City of Minneapolis. And this is, they're actually designated landmarks and historic districts, but they just integrated it with GIS so that you can click on this and it gives all the information about the designation, and then it also pops up a historic photo and a current photo. So that is pretty simple to do. But it's still a nice interactive, like you can make it look nice for anybody that was using it. So those are just some ideas that I had of, once you take all this information from all the properties that have been surveyed and whatever ends up being on the list, how you could display it to the public and have it be something that's easy to use and has a function as well as just being fun.
It's great.
I like it.
I think it makes the information just a lot more accessible to people. To have
Yeah.
the map and have some context to it, and it becomes a lot more useful.
Yeah, and so for my job, I do a lot of public engagement stuff, and we've been doing a lot more map-based things where people put their comments on a map. And even if people haven't used it before, it seems to be pretty successful and accessible for people because people know things spatially, and so it's a lot easier to look at it that way.
It's just fun.
Yeah, and you can.
Yeah, it gets at the point of what we're trying to do, which is really celebrate and educate, get people excited about and more aware of the history, rather than just like a list that feels like, oh, I'm on the list.
Yeah, I think this seems
So
less
that's kind of
scary.
cool.
Like, oh, it's just fun, I'll look up who lived in this house or whatever. So that would be something that we could hopefully get a grant for,
Yeah.
an education grant for a consultant to.
That would be very cool. That would be great, yes, very cool.
Alright, thanks for indulging me.
Nice work.
Thanks, Lisa, that's great.
Yeah, good information.
Good goal. Okay, well, what else, anything else to
First
discuss
committee?
tonight?
First committee?
First committee, yeah, Lisa, you wanna pick your person here? Laura's not here, so you pick her.
Do you wanna be a part of it?
I'd be happy to
Okay.
help you, so.
Cool.
We'll plug Laura in on the next one,
Sounds good.
but yeah, maybe we can meet in the next couple of weeks and get the mission rolling and.
Yeah, cause I think the grant applications are due April 1st.
Oh, wow, that's
Okay.
really great. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
So we can, we'll talk to our new grant person
Yes, yeah.
and see what might be available there for a resource for us.
You are a leader, so you let me know. I'm available. We're going to Saving Places next week, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are not good days to meet, but the rest of the time should be good.
Okay, sounds good.
Speaking of Saving Places, I'm going, Kim, you're going, Andy, you're going? Good, okay.
I'm going and we
You're
have-
going, and so
another-
is Elizabeth
Elizabeth.
K. Marquetti.
Yes,
All right, she's a new staffer with the city.
we knew you.
Good. Try to, circle the wagons while we're down there. Pick out, there's a number of very good topics that they're talking about this year. Nobody's very interested in the tours, I don't think.
Yeah,
Tours
no
are
one,
kinda,
I'm there to
no
learn.
got excited about the tours.
Wander
Yeah.
around tours.
yeah, there we go, but okay, maybe we can get together and talk a little bit about which ones
I
we should
know,
attend. And then
I'd be more than
we can
one.
get together afterwards and talk about what we've learned. And bring it back to the board in February.
Yeah, I'll schedule something for our next month.
Sounds good.
And one of the things that I was planning on doing, and I think we should all do this, we should take this as a mission. There will be tons of historians and preservationists there, and huge local presence. And I wanna buttonhole everybody to get a letter of support for that crazy barn for the application to the endangered places list. And yeah, I was at an art symposium at the art museum and had a long conversation with 3 historians. You know, museum people, academics, you know, the whole 9 yards, preservation historians. And had a wonderful conversation with them. They're people I know. And then I realized like an hour later that I never even made a peep about, oh yeah, I need a letter from you. Like, cool, missed opportunity. So I'm determined never to miss another opportunity.
So we have been in touch with the potential applicant coming in with a project for that property. And they are coming in next week for pre-application conference to discuss a couple of different things, including, I think, some ideas on the historic properties.
Right, our ways to preserve.
Yeah.
Both the house and the barn. Yeah,
Wow.
They were a little bit more iffy on the house, unless you've had more conversations.
well, I think we've organized a tour.
Well, they wanted to have this pre-application meeting first.
Yes.
And then we would organize a tour
Right,
for whomever would like to go.
and I'd like to see the house too. They've got a contract on the property and they've seen the house and they're having a little trouble understanding the historic value of it, so, but the barn, they see the historic value of it, it's in such peril that they're worried about how to preserve it and how to, is it possible to move it, those types of things. So, preserve it, maybe in a different location, right? They've had people out to look at the barn and basically they say if you touch it, it could just fall over. So they've got their eye on it and they're wanting to feature that in the property. Maybe not necessarily in that location, but somehow preserve that barn. So I think there's some positive interaction there that's gone on so far.
Very pleasant meeting that I had with them.
Have you seen the house?
I've only seen photos.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I'm anxious to go on the
I've
tour.
just had glimpses of it, but so I don't know anything about the house itself. It seems like the compelling reason from a historical perspective is just, the person who lived in it and, his role in the development of Littleton.
Right.
Yeah, and apparently it is a very well-built and designed ranch house.
Yeah, I knew somebody that, and was at least 20 years ago, that was going to potentially rent it. And they wound up not renting it, but that was my only experience with that house. They liked it.
Yeah, so, we talked about the potential of moving that one as well and finding a new use for it on the property.
But we'll have more information here in the coming weeks.
That'd be great. Love to take a tour of that property, just to, just kind of get the lay of the land.
Yeah,
Because you can't get back in there.
right.
Okay.
Guess our last piece of business might be just to talk about do a pre-application with the post office folks for our historic
Yes.
local designation.
So we had a lot of trouble getting any response from the post office, but that was between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we put that off. Now it's the first of the year and I will be making a call to see if they can meet with us. We need to have a meeting per the code with somebody from staff and the chair of the Historical Preservation Board to talk about benefits and obligations upon being a local landmark before we can process the application. And, in this case, it's federal property, so they're not obliged to follow our obligations. But the code does require the meeting, so we're gonna be moving forward on that, hopefully very soon.
So hopefully that'll happen next week or two, if we can get a hold of Maureen.
Yeah, I'm prepared just to walk over there and
Yeah.
ask for her.
Call in advance and find out if she's there and then just
Oh, maybe
Go.
you could send her a letter.
Alright, well, good. Any other business to discuss?
I have none.
Okay, Mike, anything on your end?
I have none.
Board members?
I have a work event next for the February meeting, so just FYI, since I know we're close to
Okay,
not having quorum,
alright,
sorry, I can't make it.
that's okay.
And
By that time, we should have had a chance to meet and we can talk, I'll talk about it.
Okay.
and when do we get new board members? Is that April or March?
April.
April.
And you recall that we'll have another Wednesday meeting in February, the Wednesday following Monday President's Day holiday.
19.
Alright,
Is it the 19th or the 26th or 25th?
Let's see.
I thought the calendar looked. 26th. Well, yeah, that was like after. So if it's the 19th, I can come. If it's the 26th, I can't.
To Arizona in February, but it looks like that trip is coming.
Oh, yes, so it turns out that there is the Building Board of Appeals scheduled for the 19th, so we've been pushed then to the 26th of February.
Yes, that's the day I can't come, sorry.
The Building Board of Appeals meets maybe once or twice a year. But I see there's a placeholder now for them,
alright,
even though they may not meet. So we'll take the 26th, so we've got that one.
do you anticipate a public hearing at all, Andrea, at this point, or?
For the 26th.
26th?
I haven't heard one.
We cast the deadline for certificate of appropriateness application for February, so the next one will, and we may have one for March.
Alright. We'll see you all
In a month.
4 or 5 weeks. And Lisa and I'll get together in the meantime, we'll see you guys down at Saving Places.
Yeah, let's actually.
Yeah, meeting adjourned.
Oh, gosh, I already made it.
So I couldn't pull it up.
Cut the poles and I'm like, what should I be doing that? Let's talk.
I've not been on
I
used to have
probably a lunch or
tour that was a GIS
Oh, are you
and an
going
app
there?
Yeah, I think
that
it's
internet made, is that still accessible to them?
So I think it's
I'll check on that, that was someone in Public Works to put that together.
Cause I go to the.